They say some houses never let their secrets go, where whispers live behind every wall, and the dead keep pretending they're alive. This is The Others, 2001, a haunting mystery where reality bends and every prayer hides a sin. The story begins inside a vast, isolated mansion shrouded in fog, where Grace, a strict and deeply religious woman, wakes from a nightmare, gasping for air. Her husband never returned from the war, leaving her alone to care for their 2 children, Anne and Nicholas. That morning, 3 strangers arrive at her doorstep: an older woman named Mrs. Mills, a gardener called Mr. Tuttle, and a young mute girl named Lydia. Grace assumes they've come about the job for servants, since her previous staff vanished without a word. She lets them in immediately, unaware that this single decision will unravel everything she believes to be true. As she gives them a tour, Grace lays down 3 strict rules. No door is to be opened before the last one is closed. They must work quietly. And most importantly, the curtains must always stay drawn. Her children, Anne and Nicholas, suffer from a rare illness. Sunlight burns their skin in seconds. So the house must stay in complete darkness, sealed from every trace of light. Soon, the new servants begin their duties. But soon, she realizes something strange. The letter she wrote to advertise for new servants was never mailed. So how did these people know to come here? Mrs. Mills calmly says she worked in this house long ago, before the war. That answer doesn't sit right with Grace. Just then, Grace hears the sound of a child crying. She rushes upstairs, first to Nicholas, then to Anne, but both children deny crying. Instead, Anne claims she heard it too. Anne insists that it was a boy named Victor who lives in the house with them, and he cries because he doesn't want them there. When Grace checks the rooms, the doors that were locked seconds ago now stand wide open. Furious, she blames the servants, but they swear they've done nothing. That night, Anne and Nicholas awaken to find the curtains open again. A voice whispers from the shadows, "Get off my bed." Terrified, Nicholas screams, and Grace rushes in. Anne insists that it was Victor, but Grace refuses to believe her and punishes her for scaring her brother, making her stand in the hall and read Bible verses until she apologizes. But Anne still refuses. She wasn't lying. One afternoon, when Grace working on her embroidery, she heard a loud noise coming from upstairs. Startled, she called out for her servant Lydia to keep quiet. But when she looked out the window, she saw both Lydia and Mrs. Mills outside in the yard. Confused and uneasy, Grace climbed the stairs to see what was happening. Her daughter Anne stood right on the stairs and told her that Victor and his family were inside the storeroom. Grace hesitated, then slowly stepped inside. Then, she began hearing faint whispers, voices of several people talking softly. Her heart started racing. She quickly pulled the sheets off the furniture one by one, trying to find who was hiding there, but the room was empty. Suddenly, the door swung open behind her. Startled, Grace turned and ran out, hoping to catch the intruders, but there was no one in sight. Next, Anne shows her a drawing she made of all the people who live in the house. A father, a mother, a boy named Victor, and a frightening old woman with pale eyes who keeps asking Anne to come with her. Convinced there are intruders, Grace grabs a rifle and orders the servants to uncover every curtain and search the entire house. But they find nothing. Later, she finds an old album filled with eerie photographs, portraits of people who look dead but dressed as if still alive. Mrs. Mills explains gently that they're post-mortem photographs, a common practice long ago. Grace is disgusted and orders her to burn them. That night, Grace gently holds Anne as she sleeps, whispering an apology for being too harsh on her. But little Nicholas, who is still awake, asks when their father will come home. This triggers Grace's grief for her husband Charles's, who is already dead. and she spends the rest of the night crying. Then, suddenly, a soft melody breaks the silence. The piano starts playing downstairs. Grace freezes. She grabs a lantern and a rifle, her hands trembling, and walks toward the sound. But the moment she steps into the room, the piano stops. Paranoid, she locks the piano lid and turns to leave, but before she can take another step, the door slams shut behind her, trapping her inside. Panicked, Grace screams for Mrs. Mills. When Mrs. Mills rushes over and opens the door, Grace stares in horror. The piano lid is open again. Mills gently tries to calm Grace, telling her that sometimes the world of the dead overlaps with the world of the living. But Grace can barely bear to hear it. The thought alone shakes her to the core. Determined to find answers, she decides to leave the house and seek out the local priest, hoping he can help her make sense of what's happening. Mills tries to stop her, but Grace refuses to listen. Before leaving, she instructs the gardener, Mr. Tuttle, to look for any gravestones hidden around the property. But as soon as she walks away, Tuttle looks uneasy. He turns to Mills and asks if it's really safe to let her go. Mills replies quietly, "The fog won't let her get far." Then, almost mysteriously, she tells him to cover the gravestones completely, to hide them from Grace. Out on the path, the fog grows unnaturally thick, swallowing the trees and the light around her. Grace pushes forward, her breath trembling, until suddenly, a figure steps out of the mist. And to her shock, it's her long-lost husband, Charles. He looks lost, dazed. Grace embraces him, sobbing with joy. She brings him home, but something about him feels wrong. He barely speaks and spends his days staring into space, as though caught between worlds. That night, Anne tells Mrs. Mills she's seen the intruders again. Mrs. Mills nods quietly. "I've seen them too." Grace tries to pretend everything is normal, but the unease deepens. When she checks on Anne, she sees her playing under a veil. But when she pulls it back, Grace freezes. For a split second, her daughter's face looks old, wrinkled, ancient. In a panic, Grace attacks her, only to realize she's been hallucinating. Later, her husband confronted her, saying he knew what she had done that day, the day she lost control. Grace breaks down, denying it, insisting she would never hurt her children. Charles simply says he must return to war. He only returned to say goodbye. This infuriates Grace, because she only wished her husband to be beside her. But he disappears that next morning. Grieving, Grace goes out to the front gate, hoping to catch up with him, but he's gone. Meantime, the children wake up in screams. On hearing the scream, Grace rushes inside and finds that all of the curtains are missing. Panicked, she shields her children with a coat and takes them to the only dark room left in the house. Grace grows more paranoid by the hour. She questions the servants about the missing curtains, but they insist they haven't taken them. Furious and convinced the servants are plotting to harm her children, Grace snaps. She grabs a shotgun and points it at them, warning them to stay away. She snatches the keys from their hands and fires all three on the spot. As they walk away in silence, Mrs. Mills turns to the others and says softly, "It's time to uncover the graves." Grace spends the rest of the day tearing the house apart, searching for the curtains, certain the servants have hidden them. Upstairs, Anne whispers to her brother Nicholas that their mother has gone mad again, just like that terrible day. Nicholas refuses to believe it, but when Anne climbs out the window saying she's going to find their father, he panics and follows her. The two children wander through the fog-covered garden. Then, through the mist, they find 3 old gravestones. As they brush off the dirt, their faces freeze in terror. The names carved into the stones are Mrs. Mills, Mr. Tuttle, and Lydia. Back inside the house, Grace bursts into the servants' quarters. Digging through drawers and boxes, finds an old photograph, a post-mortem portrait of the 3 servants, dead. The truth hits her like lightning. The servants aren't human. They're ghosts. Outside, the three figures rise slowly from the fog and begin walking toward Anne and Nicholas. The children scream and run back to the house. Grace sees them from the window, grabs her gun, and shouts for them to get inside. She fires at the approaching figures, but the bullets pass straight through them. Then Mrs. Mills tells her they died of tuberculosis more than 50 years ago, and they mean no harm. But Grace refuses to believe her and locks herself and the children inside. She screams for them to leave, to go back to the grave, but Mrs. Mills calmly replies that the house now belongs to both the living and the dead, and they must learn to live together. Grace yells back, saying the dead should leave, but Tuttle quietly replies, "Even if they go, the intruders are already here, living." Meanwhile, Anne and Nicholas hide inside a wardrobe, trembling. Suddenly, the doors creak open, and an old blind woman stares straight at them. The children scream in terror. Downstairs, Mrs. Mills whispers, "The intruders have found the children." Now it's time for you to face the truth. "What truth?" Grace gasps, then races upstairs. She bursts into a room and freezes. The old blind woman, 2 men, and a married couple sit at a table covered with candles and papers. Her children sit beside them, pale and shaking. The old woman gently asks Anne, "What happened in this house, child? What did your mother do?" Anne hesitates. Nicholas pleads with her not to speak, but the old woman keeps writing. Finally, Anne whispers something about the pillow. Grace's eyes widen in horror. The old woman looks up and says, "Why do you stay here if you were dead?" Then Grace screams in anger that they're alive. She hurls objects, shakes the table, and tears all the paper wildly. Then suddenly, the scene flips. From the other side, the truth is revealed. The family at the table are alive. Grace and her children are the ghosts haunting them. The husband and wife look terrified. The wife sobs that she can't live in this cursed house anymore and tells her husband the story of the previous owner, a woman who went mad and killed her children before taking her own life. Grace freezes. The memories flood back. The screams, the smothering, the silence. Now she remembers everything. The day she lost control, suffocated her children, and then ended her own life. Tears fill her eyes as she collapses to the floor, whispering, "Oh God, what have I done?" In the final scene, Mrs. Mills says, "Now you know. You're one of us. The intruders will leave soon, but others will come again. And when they do, they must learn to share this house." Grace and her children finally stand by the sunlight for the first time, watching as the intruders putting up the house for sale and leaves. With that, the movie ends. Please like, comment, and subscribe for more. Thanks for watching.